Welcome back to our podcast series on the history of rock music. In part 4, we'll be exploring the rise of heavy metal and hard rock in the 1970s. This was a decade of rebellion and excess, and the music of this era reflected those cultural values. We'll be discussing the origins of heavy metal, the emergence of hard rock, and the influence of these genres on the wider world of music. Let's start by talking about the origins of heavy metal. While there's no single band or artist that can be credited with inventing the genre, there were a number of important developments in the late 1960s and early 1960s and early 1970s that set the stage for its emergence. One of the most important of these was the rise of psychedelic rock, which had pushed the boundaries of what was possible in popular music. Heavy metal took these experimental sounds and added an element of aggression, creating a new form of music that was loud, fast, and heavy. One of the most influential bands in the early days of heavy metal was Black Sabbath. Formed in Birmingham, England in 1969, the band was known for its dark, brooding sound, which drew on elements of blues and hard rock. Their self-titled debut album, released in 1970, is widely regarded as a landmark in the history of heavy metal, and it paved the way for countless imitators in the years that followed. Another important development in the 1970s was the emergence of hard rock. This was a genre that combined the heavy sound of heavy metal with a more melodic approach to songwriting. Bands like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple and AC/DC were at the forefront of this movement, blending elements of blues, rock and roll, and heavy metal to create a sound that was both powerful and catchy. One of the most interesting things about the rise of heavy metal and hard rock in the 1970s was the way these genres influenced the wider world of music. Heavy metal, in particular, had a profound impact on punk rock, which emerged in the mid-1970s as a reaction against the excesses of the era. Bands like the Sex Pistols and The Clash drew on the aggression and energy of heavy metal, but added a political and social dimension that set them apart from their predecessors. The 1970s was also a decade of experimentation and innovation in the world of music technology. Advances in recording technology allowed artists to push the boundaries of what was possible in popular music, and this helped to drive the evolution of heavy metal and hard rock. The use of distortion and other effects became increasingly common, allowing guitarists to create a range of sounds and textures that had never been heard before. Finally, it's worth noting the impact of heavy metal and hard rock on popular culture in the 1970s. These genres were often associated with rebellion and excess, and they became a symbol of a generation that was pushing against the status quo. This influence can be seen in everything from fashion to film, and it helped to shape the cultural landscape of the era. In conclusion, Part 4 of our series has explored the rise of heavy metal and hard rock in the 1970s. We've discussed the origins of heavy metal, the emergence of hard rock, and the influence of these genres on the wider world of music. We've also touched on the impact of technology on the evolution of these genres and their wider cultural significance. In the next part of our series, we'll be discussing the rise of punk rock and new wave in the late 1970s and early 1980s.